Next, from Springfield, we head to the House floor for a debate over the fiscal year 2018 budget. This runs about 50 minutes.
Mr. Clerk.
Floor Amendment number 2 is Operator Representative Greg Harrison, has been approved for consideration.
Mr. Harris on Amendment 2.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Senate Bill 6, Amendment number 2, is the appropriations side of a balanced budget for the state of Illinois. As you know, SB 9 is the revenue portion and has been available for your inspection. Now, we all know how dire this situation our state is in. And as I've thought about what to say today, I'm trying to think of, what great speech could I give or something. There's really nothing you can say, given the gravity of what's facing us today. And we know that, across Illinois, people are watching from every corner of our state to see what we do here, if we act and if we get our job done. So I don't want to give a political speech or a table-pounding speech. The stakes are way too high. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows that we're standing here today staring into an abyss. We're staring into an abyss that's going to, face us tomorrow morning when the clock passes midnight. It's going to engulf everything we wish to do here and stifle every important issue facing our state. Every Illinois family, business, school district, university, daycare, senior center, hospital, every first responder, every farmer, every bond rating agency, every investor, and every construction worker knows that today is the make or break day. It's our moment to put everything else aside except the future and well-being of our state. How we'll vote today will probably be the most consequential act that any one of us makes in our lives. Every person in the state hangs in the balance. Our seniors, children, the most vulnerable, don't want to hear from us any political rants. They don't want to hear any finger pointing from us. They don't want any more blaming. No one wants to hear any excuses. No one wants to hear it. They've heard it over and over. Today, people want to see action, and they want to see us solve a problem that has hung over us for far too long. I spoke the other day with Representative Grant Worley, the gentleman from Naperville, who wanted everyone in this room to realize a significance of this state for the ability of our state to ever dig our way out of this financial abyss. He reminded me that our credit rating is one step above junk grade. Should we fail to act by midnight tonight, our failure could result in a credit downgrade that would have catastrophic effects on our state in the financial markets. And then once a downgrade is taken, it may be years before we could repair the damage. Years. Our bond rating will not go back up overnight once it goes down, and people need to understand that. It will cripple our daily operations and our ability to borrow to pay down our $15 billion backlog of bills. And even worse, because of what's known as the contagion effect, and every one of us who has to go home and talk to our local units of government needs to understand this. Because of the contagion effect, your school districts, local units of government, universities, libraries, transit systems, and other people's agencies' credit ratings are going to be dragged right down with us. We don't have any more time. We can't take one more day to delay. This is what we're facing. It's bleak, it's catastrophic. And there are really two choices today. Do we drive the state over the cliff, or do we start down the road to stabilizing our finances and saving our state? I want to just briefly tell you some highlights of what is in this bill, then I'd be happy to answer any questions. Our goal in drafting this bill was to take the best ideas from other efforts that have been suggested by our caucus and the other three caucuses and the governor. We've drawn on the best ideas that came from the Senate in SB 6 and 9. We've drawn on ideas that were presented in the joint budget presented by the House and Senate Republicans. We've also listened for many, many hours in public hearings across the state to the testimony of hundreds of citizens who came to us to tell their stories, explain their situations, and demand that we take action and pass a budget. We've tried to accommodate the governor by substantially reducing spending, living within his expenditure limits, and the income tax rates in SB 9 that was the basis of the Republican plan which he supported. We spend less in our plan than the governor's introduced budget because we heard loud and clear and understand that we need to control our expenditures. There are $2.4 billion in cuts from current expenditure levels. This year, Illinois is on track to spend $39 billion. This proposed budget only spends $36 billion. And again, it is below the governor's introduced budget. So with passing a budget, as we all know, when we take control of our appropriation process again, rather than existing under the framework of court orders and consent decrees and continuing appropriations, we will be spending at a rate that is $3 billion less than we are spending today. This proposal fully funds pension, group health, and debt payments. It adds $350 million to elementary and secondary education to fund the evidence-based model. In addition, in the area of education, we add $65 million for additional funding to the student transportation mandated categorical and increase early childhood funding by $15 million. We fund the MAP program. We increase job training for displaced workers by $16 million. There is a 5% cut to state operations and bureaucracy across the board in order to provide funding for community-based services. But to give our departments the most flexibility to manage these cuts, we're lump summing their budgets to make their lives easier in the management area. We fund community violence program to help bring down the violence we're seeing in our streets and intervene with these young people before they are harmed, before they are shot, before they end up in the criminal justice system. We fund after-school programming, summer jobs for youth, mental health and substance abuse treatment services. Capital for projects such as road and transit and bridges is all reappropriated. The Lincoln Presidential Library is funded as a standalone entity at the request of the governor. We fund fully community care programs for seniors, and this is a point where we diverge from the governor. We propose continuing the CCP program at its current levels, and we do not support the CRP program, but have indicated over and over again our willingness to work with the other three caucuses and advocates to find a solution that would responsibly control our costs and make the program affordable as the baby boom ages. We increase funding in agriculture for extension services, county fairs, and agriculture societies. Funding is increased for soil and water conservation districts. We restore welcoming centers and immigrant integration services for refugees. Addiction treatment, supportive housing, community-based supports for people with disabilities, respite care for the families raising developmentally disabled children, the epilepsy program, and the autism program are all restored. So here's where we are. According to the United Way, if we don't act today, 36% of all human service agencies in Illinois, 36% face closure within 6 months. 40,000 people with disabilities will lose services. 69,000 people needing treatment for substance abuse will be denied. 80,000 people needing mental health treatment will be turned away. 47,000 survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence will lose services. 40,000 high-risk youth will be turned back onto the streets. Every road project, bridge repair, transit improvement, and all other capital projects in the state are being shut down and mothballed as we sit here. If the clock strikes midnight tonight, 25,000 construction workers will lose their jobs. That will happen tonight. Our universities and colleges are shutting down, losing faculty. Students are fleeing to other states. Elementary and secondary schools may not open in the fall. This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. We're proposing today a balanced budget that reduces our expenditures. The income tax and corporate income tax rates that we're proposing that will be in another bill are identical to those proposed that came to us from the Senate. We're at a very serious moment. And I hope we all understand the consequences of our actions today. I would respectfully urge your support. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Gentleman moves for the adoption of the amendment. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put a 5-minute timer on everyone, but we will not limit the number of speakers on this very, very important piece of legislation. So the first speaker is Mr. Anderson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll speak to the bill. I don't have any questions of Greg. I do have a thank you to Greg and a thank you to all the hard work that's gone into this compromise. And I don't need to repeat the danger and the negative consequences that Greg so clearly outlined for us. But I come to you today with joy. I come to you today with joy, not with fear, not with remorse, not with hesitation. I come to you with joy because I know, and I've always said, I know the people in this room are here to do the right thing. And I know today we're going to do the right thing. We're going to save our state. We're going to save our state together. I wore Thank you for that, but that applause is for all of us, not just for my statement. What I was going to say was I wore a purple tie today. Purple is not red. Purple is not blue. Purple is what we need to be today to get this job done. And so I again say I come with joy. This is the right thing to do. It's a balanced budget. We're being responsible. And I want to just reemphasize the good, not the negatives of what happens if we don't do this, because we are going to do this. I want to reemphasize the good, the things that we're going to help. We're going to reinstitute those fundings for those needed human services. We're going to fund autism. We're going to fund breast screenings. We're going to fund at-risk youth. We're going to make that happen again. We're going to stabilize our state. We're going to let our businesses grow because they know there will be a state tomorrow and the next day and the next day. We're going to make all of that happen and more. We're going to save our educational institutions. They're not going to lose their accreditation. We are going to do great things today, and I'm going to walk out of here with a smile on my face because I know we're going to do it together. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do this.
Mr. Wheeler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Sponsor yields.
Greg, I got a call this morning from some providers who are interested in if Amendment 2 to Senate Bill 6 has any provisions that will help us get that backlog of bills paid down.
Very good question. This is an FY18 appropriation, but as you know, there are also groups talking about how do we deal with closing the gap for the unpaid appropriations for FY17, and also dealing with the pay down of the backlog of bills on which we're paying $800 million a year of interest. This is a separate piece of legislation. It came to us from the Senate as SB4. We look forward to working with all four caucuses and the governor to figure the best way to pay these back and reduce the cost burden on our state.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to make that clear. I think that was some people are looking for that in this bill. It may not be there. There's more work to do still with respect to that issue. And secondly, Greg, is as you know, for my entire time in this chamber, I've been advocating, first of all, a process that is prescribed by law. This is an appropriations bill. I hope that before we get to the third reading on it, we could actually go through the process of maybe adopting a revenue estimate before we actually get that process completed.
And before you sit down, I just want to be sure I I may have stated something a little incorrectly. There are FY17 appropriations in this bill, so bills can start going to the comptroller, but then we have to consider also the larger case of how do we pay those bills, where does the cash come from when they arrive, which would be part of the borrowing process.
Thank you. I appreciate the answers to your questions.
Mr. Harris for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before you start the clock, if I may verify, this is an amendment. How many votes does it take to pass?
An amendment requires more positive votes than negative votes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And on that note, I'd like to say to my colleagues in the House, this passes with a simple majority of those people voting on the question. That is not going to be enough. There have to be, if we're serious about this, 71 votes or more on this amendment. 71 votes or more, not just a simple majority. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, here we are. We're at the last day of session. Final hours, we have a couple of votes that we have to take. This is an appropriation bill. It's not a revenue bill. It's half of the equation. It appropriates roughly $36.5 billion, which is down, as the sponsor said, from the 38 plus, maybe even close to 39 billion that we're spending now due to court orders and consent decrees and all those other things that are forcing us to send out checks without appropriations. I know that many people will be voting no, and I respect every member for any vote that they take. They know their districts. I would not question them. Some may be voting no because maybe they believe that we need to do this, but their constituents have said no, no more spending, you've got to hold the line. Others may believe that we can indeed live on a $32 billion revenue base that we're bringing in now, and they believe that our expenditure should be cut to that, and that's their contention. I respectfully disagree with that. Let's look at some of our required payments. We're bringing in $32 billion. We have a $7 billion pension payment. We have group health of $1.8 billion. We have debt service of $2.1 billion. Medicaid is another $7 billion. If we want to pay for K through 12, that's what, $6.5 billion. Right there, you've added up to over $24 billion of the 32 that we're bringing in now. So I suppose we could cut the Department of Agriculture, but I'm not sure that the farmers would like that. I suppose we could cut the Department of Natural Resources, but those people who go to Cut Rock State Park and all those other parks like to have the conservation police in place. We could cut public health. We could cut state police. We could cut the Department of Transportation. But you know what? There are services that need to be provided. There's an interest group out there that says, well, just do away with the local government distributive fund. Oh, that's $1.2 billion, which I'm sure the municipal officials would be real happy with us to do something like that. So I don't like everything that's in this plan. Absolutely not. There will be something in every budget plan that someone doesn't like. But we need a spending plan that recognizes the needs of downstate, the city of Chicago, and the suburbs. I believe this plan does that. I'm not going to let our universities lose their accreditation because we don't have a spending plan in place. Sure, it's fair to ask, how did we get here? And some people will say, well, it's that Speaker Madigan who is being portrayed as evil incarnate. Some blame Governor Rauner, who probably has been extremely firm in his demands for reform. But I'll tell you something, we all, in my opinion, share the blame. We all share the blame, myself included, because we have enabled our leaders to do this. We have enabled our leaders to get to this position. And that's unfortunate that we're in the position that we are in. But now is the time to bring this nightmare to an end. Now is the time to stop quarreling and start governing. Now is the time to stop confrontation and go to compromise. The spending plan that's in front of us today is reasonable. It's one that addresses our needs. It's one that moves us forward in a responsible way. I recommend a yes vote.
Representative Jimenez for 5 minutes.
To the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick question of the sponsor.
Sponsor yields.
Will the passage of this bill here today lead to massive layoffs across state government?
No, not at all. Again, we have made some departmental reductions, but we have lump summed all the funds so that the department secretaries and directors can manage their departments most effectively. We're believing that if there are vacancies that could be maybe left unfilled for a month or two longer and help make up that difference, there is no way I see that there would be massive layoffs.
Thank you, Representative. To the bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Representative Greg Harris for all the work he put in to getting us here today. I want to thank leaders like Representative Steve Anderson and many others on the other side for the work they did in getting us here today. What we have before us, because of all of that hard work in a bipartisan way, is an honest, fair, and balanced budget that cuts spending by $2.5 billion. This plan spends $800 million less than both the governor's proposed budget and the Senate Democrats' proposal. This plan funds critical services all across the board. And I'm especially supportive of this bill because of what it does for higher education. Our universities are on the brink. Many of them risk losing accreditation if we don't pass this budget today. Students are leaving our state in masses, and we are losing good, talented professors like Dr. Nanette Petit from Northeastern Illinois University, who is here today as my guest and joins us in the gallery. And I think we should give all of our professors like Dr. Petit a round of applause for what they were able to continue to do during this budget impasse. Let's give them a round of applause. This is not a perfect plan, but it's the best plan that was developed in a bipartisan way. President Abraham Lincoln once said, "Be sure to put your feet in the right place and then stand firm." Members, this is the right place. Plant your feet right here, right now, today, and stand firm. Stand firm, Democrats. Stand firm, Republicans. You've done great work. Stand firm. Today is the day we get our state on the right track. We're going to save our schools. We're going to save our social service providers. And we're going to save the state of Illinois by voting yes on Senate Bill 6. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ives for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's been a lot of talk about what this budget funds. Well, let me tell you what this budget funds. This budget funds higher education that just gave the NIU past president a $600,000 bailout after he was discovered violating our procurement laws according to an OEIG investigation. This budget continues to fund that type of behavior. This budget continues to fund a Medicaid program that now has 1 in 4 Illinoisans on it and allows single able-bodied adults to stay on that program without getting a job. This budget does nothing to fund at all our back bills, which are a festering problem that needs to be taken care of. This budget also funds things that are based on your demographic group rather than based on just simply you as an Illinois taxpayer. This budget continues to fund all sorts of particular tax breaks for particular interest groups rather than a general tax system that treats all the same. This budget continues to fund a particular university that last year only had 86 students in their freshman class. That's less than I had on my middle school cross-country team. But yet we're not going to talk about consolidating higher education that is losing enrollment. This budget will fund an education program, the evidence-based model, that has failed in all the other states that have attempted it. This budget does not look out for small businessmen. This does not look out for the ordinary taxpayer. This budget is a gross overspending of people's hard-earned income, going to a bloated system that we have failed to reform. This budget continues to form prevailing wage rates where if you're a laborer in DuPage County, your analyzed compensation would be over $120,000. This budget continues to fund bloated local governments through state subsidies without forcing us to reform those same systems that create the pressures on property tax owners at the local level. This budget is not our best work. This budget does not get Illinois out of uncompetitive environment when it comes to attracting business. This budget is a disaster, and this budget is the death knell for Illinois. It tells every taxpayer who's capable of moving from the state of Illinois, it's time to pick up stakes and leave. That's what this budget does. I urge a no vote.
Representative Ammons for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill, first let me thank Chairman Harris for the great work and facilitation that he led as a member of the budget team who met for a couple months attempting to bring this to resolution. It is not the easiest thing to do to lead an effort that would ultimately have to raise the taxes to meet the needs of the state. It is not an easy job for Chairman Harris to have to run between the two chambers to try to get consensus on Senate Bill 6 from the leadership in the Senate. It's not easy to have to work across the aisle and bring the meeting of the minds together to put on this board today a proposal that will bring an end to the impasse that has caused so much harm to our state. Everyone in the state is experiencing the harm that not having a budget has produced. And Chairman Harris has done it with great dignity and stately manhood that I believe represents exactly what we are supposed to do as legislators in this House. I also want to thank our floor leader on the other side, Representative Anderson. Truly is a man of great passion and love, and I believe that in his heart he has worked diligently on this and every other bill to look out for the interests of his members and his constituents. And to the members of the Democratic Party leadership, who has done everything, I believe, within their power and authority to bring to the board today the best compromise that we can find, to address the needs of the governor that have held the budget for this long, but to address those needs through legislative procedures and process here. I thank all of our leadership for their direction. And for my members in my community, to my constituents, to the University of Illinois, who has worked diligently to come here and speak to all of us about the importance that higher ed plays as an economic engine to this state. They have contributed greatly, not only through research, but as a developing community, making sure that people have jobs in our community. I appreciate the leadership of the University of Illinois. And so today we are called at a moment in history, the moment that has never visited our state before, This moment is calling each of us to the history books today to determine where you will come down on the most important thing that we are called to do in this house, which is to pass a budget. No, it is not perfect. It is not where I believe we should be. I believe we should be spending what is necessary to provide all services, and that there are no waiting lists for child care, and that there are no waiting lists for seniors, and that we adequately fund our Meals on Wheels programs, and that every student who needs MAP funding gets it. This budget doesn't do that. But it does bring us to the middle enough that we can not only vote yes, but we can vote yes knowing that we will continue to work even after this bill passes. So, today I wore a yellow jacket because I believe it represents the sunshine that will rise tomorrow. I do believe that we have an opportunity to stand together to continue to negotiate further. We can always pass appropriations bills if this one is not right. But this is what we have today, and this is what history is calling us to. And I urge and I vote today.
Representative Wallace for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill. Yeah, these are very serious times in the state of Illinois, and for those of us who have not been privy to all the negotiations, look, we all know the seriousness that we're facing as a state. We all know the seriousness of inaction. We all come here with different perspectives on how the state should function, what happens in the economy, what is the proper role of government at the state level, the local level. But for those of us who are concerned about this bill and maintenance of the status quo, we are hearing from our residents, we're hearing from our residents who depend upon state services and local services. They depend upon our social service agencies, but we also hear from those who provide a large portion of our state's tax revenue. And what they are telling us is that there are greener pastures elsewhere. They go back, many of them, just like we do, just like our families, go back generations in the state of Illinois. We are in an increasingly competitive environment globally and within our nation. And these the taxpayers, small businesses, medium businesses, and such, they provide jobs for our constituents. They contribute to the local economy. They contribute to the state economy. They contribute to the national economy. And if we don't heed the warnings that they are giving us, if we don't heed the warnings that the rating agencies are giving us about some of our structural the demands on our budget, things like Medicaid spending and pension spending is consuming an ever larger portion of our state's budget. And so it's not a matter of being cold or hard-hearted. We're looking at this picture from a 30,000-foot view. We're listening to what our taxpayers are telling us. We're looking at the math of the consumption of the overall state budget, and simply raising taxes or raising tax rates or raising taxes on things like services or the things that we all depend upon. If we're looking at the numbers and we see the consequences, my district is in Palatine. We're the north part of Cook County. There are billboards, there are banners that are just over the road to Lake Cook Road. They say, no Cook County taxes here. Now, why would that be something that a business would promote? It's because tax policy does affect behavior. It affects the behavior of individuals. affects the behavior of larger entities like businesses. And we're not just talking about big business. We had a vote this week on edge tax credits. I was one of the people that voted no. I don't think we should be giving special breaks to special interests. I think the best tax policy is to treat everyone equally, fairly, and just make for a transparent environment so that a business with one employee or a business with 10,000 employees can thrive. And so, we have policy differences. I do believe that we should try to work in a spirit of civility, but to characterize someone or an individual as mean-spirited, I don't think that's fair. We're going to continue to have these very difficult discussions because no matter what happens today or tomorrow or next month, we still will have very, very, very difficult challenges ahead as a state. And the need for reform is being demanded by our citizens, not just because of one person's political perspective, but because if we don't, we cannot fund the other essential things that our citizens need or demand. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Ford for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill, I want to first thank Greg Harris for his hard work, and I also want to thank the Speaker of the House for all of the caucuses that we had. There's always talk about rank and file members not having a say, but the leader on this side really engaged all of us, and I believe that all the Democrats on this side of the aisle, rank and file members, had a say in crafting this amendment and this proposal. So I want to thank the Speaker for that and thank the budget team as well. I'm from the west side of Chicago, many of you know, and we need this passage of this bill. We need this passage because there are so many people dying of heroin overdoses on the west side of Chicago, in Oak Park, and different parts of my district. So the passage of this is very important. And I also want to tell the governor that I think that he could claim a victory for reducing the spending in the state of Illinois as a Republican. Because me as a Democrat, I think that we need to spend more to take care of the people of Illinois, and the governor could take this as a victory by driving down spending in Illinois. And so I urge the governor to take note and to take pride in his hard work of driving down spending in the state of Illinois, and I urge him to support this measure so that we could protect the most vulnerable people in the state of Illinois. It's clear that if we don't pass this, we will be putting ourselves in a penny-wise, pound-foolish state because we're going to spend more money, and to me, that is not what a conservative governor would want, to spend more money than we need to spend. A conservative governor understands that he doesn't want to waste taxpayer dollars. A conservative governor understands that it's very important that we pass this measure today and end the wasteful spending of taxpayer dollars, because to continue to spend without a budget is exactly what we're doing. We're spending more of taxpayer dollars and we're digging ourselves deeper in a hole. So I urge the governor to recognize victory when there's victory, and I urge all of us to continue to make Illinois better and better by passing this bill and to continue to work to have a better and more balanced budget in the state of Illinois. I urge an aye vote.
Leader Durkin is recognized.
Thank you. To the amendment. Let's just make sure we know what we're voting on right now. We are voting for an amendment. We are not voting on third reading. But this is a good start. We have about 13 hours left, and I am committed to getting the job done. That means a balanced budget. responsible cuts and reforms that are going to put Illinois back on track. Now, this chamber, compared to the one on the other side of the building, has been very partisan. There has been a lot of activity, and the tensions have been very high. I understand it. And because of that, there has been a lack of good faith that has permeated this chamber for the past 2 years. Here's my commitment. I am committing to vote for this amendment, and I'm also committing to put Republican votes on this, not just to get passage, but to bring us past 71. And that, to me, is my commitment to you, that we continue with our work today, because I'm telling you, we are close. We are so close, I can taste it. But folks, bear with us. I'm offering you this gesture of good faith that we are prepared to bring this to the final hours to finish this impasse and put Illinois back on track. I am voting yes on this amendment, and let's get back to work.
Representative Senti for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very briefly, I'd like to address what our constituents have asked us to work on. They've asked us to work on a full year balanced budget. They have asked us to stop kicking the can down the road. They have asked us for cuts. They've asked us for reforms. And they've asked us to address the backlog of bills. They've asked us to compromise and work together. So I just want to say that people do on the outside feel that we are very partisan, and this chamber does not have people who want to work together. So I want to conclude by saying thank you to Greg, thank you to Steve, thank you to Elaine and Sarah and Avery, and my list could go on and on. Thank you to the senators on the other side who did the heavy lifting all session. Thank you to Leader Radonio and President Cullerton. Thank you to the 33 members on both sides of the aisle that signed the statement that asked us to move forward. Thank you for every evening you met. Thank you for every suggestion you had and every time you gave in and said, how about this? How about that? Let's work together. Let's show the world, let's show our state there is more that binds us, and let's continue with the trust of the day and get this done. I just say thank you.
Representative Kifowit for 5 minutes.
Thank you. To the bill first. Again, I'll echo what my colleagues said about Leader Harris and Leader Anderson. Thank you for being available, answering numerous questions, and keeping the information as readily as possible. I do want to address what the member from Palatine said, and I think that we do need to come together and have an economic plan for jobs in this state and a plan to get things going in the right direction. This plan today is a plan to stop the bleeding, start the breathing, but we also have to fix what is wounding Illinois, and I agree, actually, across the aisle, that we do need, and I offer my services and I offer my companionship so that we can get a true, robust economic development plan for Illinois, but we cannot do that without balancing our budget, starting to pay our bills, and getting things going in the right direction. So I think that properly funding our schools, taking care of our children, putting this state in the right direction, ending the impasse is so important and vital for the success of Illinois. And I think from this point going forward, I extend to anybody who wants to work with me that we must also continue to put good Illinois people to work, training programs, higher education, support our businesses, and create jobs as well. So I want to thank him for bringing up that point, and I think that we are in agreement with that as well. Thank you.
Mr. Harris to close.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Before I do my closing, I just want to say two things to two people in the room. To Leader Steve Anderson, you mentioned you're wearing your purple tie because it brings you luck. After being down here so long, I can't say I'm wearing my coral tie because it's the only clean thing I have left. But I also want to say to you, I talked about sort of flowery speeches, and I couldn't think of one to make on the floor. What you said today may have been, in the years I've served here, the finest remarks I've ever heard on the House floor. And I'm so grateful. And to Leader Durkin, for his remarks, maybe we have turned a corner here, ladies and gentlemen, today. Maybe we've turned a corner. And every journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And we're about to take that one step, and hopefully on issues that are important to us, and important to you, important to the city of Chicago, important to Southern Illinois and Central Illinois and the suburbs, we can continue taking steps to solve all those issues together. Ladies and gentlemen, on this, I would ask for an aye vote, and thank you all very much.
Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment will vote yes. Opposed, no. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Have all voted who wish? Please record yourselves, members. Champa-Lavia. Mr. Clerk, please take the record. On this question, there are 90 voting yes, 25 voting no, and the amendment is adopted. The chair recognizes Speaker Madigan.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, first, thank you to Leader Durkin and to the Republicans who voted for the amendment. I think it's a good step forward, a step that we can build upon. There's much work yet to be done. Therefore, the House will be in session tomorrow. Next, momentarily, I will send a message to the bond rating agencies, asking them to defer any further opinions relative to the credit rating of the state of Illinois until we've had sufficient time to finalize our budget making. That message will leave momentarily. Next, I will convene a meeting of the leaders today to continue our discussions relative to budget making and non-budget issues. And I will convene a meeting of interested parties on a revenue bill. Much work has already been done on a revenue bill. A bill has been filed, but today we'll convene interested parties in an effort to finalize the revenue bill so we can balance out spending against revenue. Again, thank you for your cooperation on this vote. Much work remains to be done. Let's keep up the good work. We'll get the job done. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, please hold Senate Bill 6 on the order of second reading.